Hello, sir. Welcome to The Source. Tell us, who are you? What do you do?
Hey, Jim, great to be here. My name is Ben Solomon. I've been in the sourcing world for 15 years, which seems crazy to say. So I'm the director of sourcing at a IT recruiting agency called Objective Paradigm. We're headquartered in Chicago. Longtime SourceCon attendee, hackathon participant, and writer, and excited to be here.
Very cool. Now, got a question for you, right? If you were putting together a sourcing A team, the best of the best, how would you go about it? And what are some things that you wish you had known earlier in your career when putting together sourcing teams that you know now?
Yeah, so I think about it sort of from a couple different levels, right? So I'd start with, okay, who am I hiring, right? How am I sourcing those people? How am I interviewing them? So, and the first question is, do you want to sort of hire experienced sourcers, or do you want to train people? And most of my experience in the sourcing team I built has been hiring folks. So if you want to hire the best of the best, just go to the SourceCon Facebook group, right? Go to the community and see who's looking, right? But let's say you want, okay, I want to hire people out of school or with a couple of years experience. I want to train them on the way that we do sourcing. That's sort of been my experience. So the people we're looking for are typically, let's call it liberal arts majors, right? Sociology, anthropology, history, whatever, who maybe have gained those research skills from their degree, but don't necessarily know what the next career step.
Did he just say anthropology?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, like Indiana Jones kind of guy.
Yeah. So I do have someone on my team who used to be an archaeologist.
Oh wow!
But there's a connection there, right? Because you're digging for something, right? Whether it's bones or whether it's the right candidate. And so that was partially my story too, right? I was a history major. I graduated college. I was like, I don't know what to do with my career, and I ended up in sourcing, and it makes sense because you get that attention to detail, those research, those kind of things, but you don't necessarily know what that next path is. So those are typically the backgrounds we're looking for. Sometimes when we look at people with a year or two of experience, we're looking at people with, again, any kind of research experience, working with any kind of CRM, sales enablement, any kind of role where they're organizing information, have to be really detail oriented. That's the kind of thing I like to see. I've seen a lot of success with people who do have experience working in a library, working in an archive, working in a museum, right? Something like that, that's showing that they're organizing and retrieval of information.
Interesting. Let me ask you that real quick, because the whole Indiana Jones thing is stuck in my head because I'm such a geek. Other people that could be on your A team that you could recruit from non-traditional HR backgrounds. You mentioned anthropology, history majors, maybe journalists, because they research people, private eyes, or
absolutely. You've had English majors, classics majors.
Why English majors? Why do you think they would be good sources?
I think just like any other ones, it's about reading and writing, organization of information, retrieval. Like if they read something, they have to understand it, and then they have to analyze it. Same thing if we're looking at a resume or LinkedIn profile. Like, you can't just look at it, and you got to really understand what you're looking at. And then, of course, writing, being good at writing is a big piece, right? Crafting those outreach messages and so on and so forth.
Library sciences, librarians too, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. So those are the kind of backgrounds we typically are seeing. In terms of our sort of interview process or vetting process, we do have a sort of take-home exercise that we send to people that come into our process. It's similar to hackathon style questions. It's hey, these aren't necessarily sourcing related because maybe you've never done sourcing before, but these are going to test kind of your internet research skills. Like I send them 7 questions. I say, pick 3 of these, give me your answer, and then also explain to me how you got your answer, because that kind of gives me some insight into their thought process and their kind of research process. And I find that very helpful when deciding, who to interview. And that's been really useful for us.
Have you ever thought about, this is kind of weird, I'm a weird guy. In Star Trek, there was a test that Kirk beat the
Kobayashi Maru.
Yes. Yep. You ever give a source of Kobayashi Maru something they could not find, it did not exist, just so you can see everything they did to try to find this purple squirrel, for lack of a better word? That doesn't exist.
I haven't, but I really like that idea. I think that can tell you a lot about like when do they give up, what paths do they go down. Like that could be really interesting.
That's a quick tip if anyone's looking for hiring sources. Use that. It would be interesting to see how long somebody would go before they finally gave up, or if they ever did give up. So.
And then so that we do that, then we have a personality assessment. It's called Predictive Index PI. We use that for all of our hires in our company. It's a quick 10-minute personality assessment, basically, and that can also kind of tell us. And so one thing that I wished I had known earlier is how important the sourcer-recruiter relationship is, and sort of managing that when you have both of those types of folks on your team. And I always talk about like they're very different personalities, right? And there's a whole spectrum of people, right? But I think of sourcing as we're the nerds, right? We're the behind the scenes, we're the researchers, the recruiters, those are the salespeople, those are the networkers, right? And everybody has skills in both areas, but you have people who are specialized in one or the other, whose personality tends towards one or the other. And when you have those folks in the right role and working together, that can be really powerful. So that PI can kind of tell us where on that kind of spectrum somebody might fall. Then we interview, then we hire people. That process has worked well for us.
Very cool. Do you put a lot of emphasis on emotional intelligence? I've heard some people are doing that because it's, I think people in my generation, dating myself, take certain interpersonal skills for granted and think that everybody knows how to be professional at all times or how to disagree without being disagreeable. But that seems to be a losing trait, a vanishing trait rather. So do you take into account emotional intelligence in your factors as well? Or does that come with a personality test?
I mean, it comes a little bit out of that, and then certainly obviously something we pay attention to in the interview, and again, thinking about how people are going to act in a professional setting, and also things like, again, like, are they going to give up if the search is too hard? Things like that can come out in the interview.
Ne Well, that has been that's very helpful, especially to anyone who's hiring right now, for sure. Thanks for that.
And then the next thing I'd really focus on is training, right? Especially when you're bringing in somebody like we do who's brand new, kind of have to indoctrinate them in the way that you do things, right? And so we have a pretty standard sourcing training program that we bring everybody through where they're learning basics, they're learning all of our tools, and I'm still a big believer in Boolean, right? Some people say, oh, you don't need it because the tools do it for you, but I think you really got to understand, even if you're using a tool, you got to understand what's behind it. And so, we're training people on that, and we do lots of practice, right? So, hey, here's a job. Tell me what you think the Boolean string should be. Okay, I'm going to give you notes. Okay, now it's good. Now go ahead and do the search and bring back some candidates. Now let's talk through the candidates and talk about why you chose this one and why I think this is good or bad. And you kind of repeat that a bunch of times using different tools. So we'll do it in our ATS, we'll do it using Bullhorn, we'll do it using, or Bullhorn is our ATS, we'll do it using LinkedIn, we'll do it using job boards. So you're getting practice on the tools, but you're also getting that sort of, you're getting your 10,000 hours, you're getting your reps in at the gym of learning how to read and understand job descriptions, learning how to read and understand resumes and making those connections, building good strings, understanding how to use those strings and those sources with the tools. And so it's really just kind of a repetition of that. And I always tell people too, like when I first started, it took me forever to do sourcing, right? You look at a resume, okay, I'm going to do my search, got my resume, oh, how do I decide if this person is right or wrong? Like I've been agonized over for 10 minutes, and now it's kind of scary. Like once you understand the role, you just, you feel like you're going too fast, right? You just yes, no, sorting people into the buckets, and it's a speed and it's a confidence thing too. The more people do it, the more confident they get in their own abilities to make those decisions.
Yeah, I really like that, how your comparison to getting the reps in. It's easy to get so reliant on a tool, but what if the tool breaks or goes down for a period of time, or you don't have access to it anymore? What would you do? I think if you're too reliant on a tool, you're going to forget the basics, and if you forget the basics, you're just sort of done, right? That's
super important. Like it's not about knowing how to use any one individual tool. It's knowing how to learn and use and understand tools and software in general, right? I should be able to put any tool in front of you. If you're a good source, you can kind of start figuring it out, right? Like I've done like ATS trainings for clients. Maybe they're implementing a new ATS. They ask for help. Oh, how do I do this? How do I set this up? And I go, well, what if we click that menu and click that and do that? It's like, oh, you must be like, no, I've never used this product, but I just have that context. Maybe we should look in that menu, and maybe it's here the thing we're looking for, and being able to figure that out quickly is super important.
Yeah, yeah. The best sourcing tool is your mind, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure, for sure. So let's say you found your A team of sourcing talent, you got them all trained up, and plus you got some experienced people on board. How do you gauge which ones are doing a good job? Like, how do you how do you ensure that you've hired the best of the best?
Yeah. So now we're getting to reporting, tracking, metrics, goals for sourcers, which can be challenging. It's harder to do that for a sourcer than it is for a recruiter, right? For a recruiter, it's easier, right? It's how many placements, how many deals, and their goal is closer to the money, as we say, right? How many deals are you closing? How many butts are you putting in seats?
Sure.
With a sourcer, we're looking at that, but that's not as good of a metric because they're earlier in the pipeline and they don't have as much influence over what happens, right? If you're a sourcer, you can find a great candidate, vet them, you give them to the recruiter, and now the recruiter has to vet them, the person has to do well in the interview, the person has to like the offer, the person has to take the offer, and you don't have any control or influence over that. Whereas a recruiter does have more control or influence over that part of the process. So it's easier to say, okay, I'm judging you, recruiter, on what happens there. Did the person take the offer? For the sourcer, it's harder to say, well, I'm going to judge you on this thing that you have very little control over. So we do look at that because also the sourcers do want to celebrate their wins, right? They want to know, well, how many placements did I source up? But you can't only look at that. So look at that in combination with sort of the beginning of the process of submissions, right? How many candidates are you putting into the beginning of part of the process, which you wouldn't usually look at for a recruiter unless they're not hitting, maybe their other goals, but it's much more important for a sourcer to understand what's happening at the beginning of the funnel because that's what they're responsible for. So we're looking at, we're counting, okay, well, how many hires did you make? And also how many offers, right? Because even if a candidate you source gets an offer, they don't take it, like you still did your job, right? You found a candidate that was good enough to get an offer. You don't have any influence over whether or not they take that offer, whether the recruiter might have some influence there. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the beginning of the process, right? How many people do you put into the process? Maybe how many people of those get that initial phone screen or get sent to that recruiter? And then it's sort of more on the recruiter, and then we'll celebrate the win at the end of the process.
Very cool. Very cool. You are a wealth of wisdom, sir. Thank you so much for being on The Source.
Yeah, thanks for having me.